Hey, Graeme.
Ian, how are you?
Good, mate. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Graeme to our next sports seminar series. I've known Graeme a long time, but obviously he's gone on to have a fantastic career in coaching. So obviously I just want to chat to you about obviously your whole career, Graeme, if that's okay.
No problem, Ian. I'm sure.
Brilliant. One of the things I want to know, Graeme, is growing up, what was it like? Nah. You'll be quality. One of the things I want to know is growing up, early life. What was that like?
For me, it was just about football, Ian. Probably similar to you. I can remember watching Shoot on a Sunday afternoon. You won't remember that. It was with George Thames, maybe 2:30 on a Sunday afternoon, and watching the local teams: Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool, Darlington, and there was coverage of their games. And I remember going out and playing when I was about 4-year-old. I thought, I'll have a go at this, and went out over the field across from my house, and that was it. I was kicking a ball. The last time I kicked the ball was when I was 50, so it was 2 months ago when I left Luton, and it's just it became a drug and took over my life, really.
I mean, obviously growing up, thinking about going back to, because obviously you went to non-league, didn't you, after leaving school? Was there aspirations to turn pro, or were there opportunities that you didn't get?
Well, I signed apprentice forms for Millwall,
right?
And I went to London when I was 16. I got released when I was 18, and I got released because I wasn't mature enough. I was from a good family. I certainly wasn't ready for Southeast London. I certainly wasn't ready for that environment at Millwall. So when I came home, my dad says, "I think you need to start playing with men," and he went up to Newcastle, and he got me a trial there under Colin Richardson. I was 18, did okay. Colin offered me terms to stay for another season, and then the first 3 months I was training every day, did really well, and they signed me on a permanent contract, and I sort of followed Colin around really for 5 years. I went I think at 18 months at Blue Star, then he moved to North Shields, and he paid a paltry figure of £1,800 to sign me, and in must have been 1990 now. And then we both went to Bridlington Town. I went a little bit before him. Signed for Bridlington Town in 1992. And I think he came about 6 weeks later. And that was me last year in non-league football. We managed to win the FA Vase at Wembley, and I signed pro that summer. I had 5 years in non-league football, which I'm grateful for, really proud of. Essential, really, when I look back. Probably the experiences that our 18-year-olds aren't getting, certainly in pro football. Under 23s football, you need to go up and play against men. You need to find out how to look after yourself and how to cope physically. It gets too big a shock when you get introduced to that at 23 and 24. So it was probably the best thing I could have done. You don't realise at the time. You're really disappointed that you've been released by Millwall, deemed not good enough. So I ended up signing pro in 93. The owner of Bridlington, as you know, Ian, bought Doncaster Rovers, give me a trial, and I managed 6-week trial. I signed professional.
So do you think, obviously going back to being released and you're saying training with men, do you think that was the making of you? Because obviously if you'd have stayed at Millwall, you might have played under reserves, under 23s, and for me it's a bit unrealistic. Obviously it's not what it was back then. Do you think that playing with men and the realism of winning really brought you on as a player?
I do, yeah. I mean, obviously there wasn't under 23s when I started out in 1986. I'm really referring to the modern player who's goes from 18s to 23s, and it's a pathway. I think the best thing they could do after 18 is go and play non-league football. But certainly from my point of view, I went out and played against men. The reserve league at Millwall at that time was really, really good. I remember, you're playing against Arsenal, Spurs, Swindon, Gillingham. You're playing on the main pitches, but you're playing against men. I remember a player who you won't remember called Dave Bambo, who had a really good career for Blackpool, played centre-half, centre-forward. I remember him giving me a dead leg on a New Year's Day game at Swindon, and sort of an introduction of what it was really about. And then obviously I wasn't good enough to stay on. I wasn't ready at that time. But my experiences from that point on, you were playing for money. It was only small money, but that money meant a lot, because I was studying as well at the time. And you had to fight. You had to fight like mad. The first couple of years was really difficult, where you're struggling to compete, and then somehow your character keeps you in there, and you dig in and you find a way, and then all of a sudden you start becoming successful. And it's not an easy route for anybody.
No, absolutely. I mean, I came through obviously non-league, similar to what yourself was, and I found that players who were at apprenticeship back in, obviously when you're talking late 80s, early 90s, they got released, and they just didn't seem to be able to handle. You want to have a certain mentality to handle non-league football, and as you said, you've gone from that then into full-time professional football, signing for Doncaster, and around about the '93 season. So, how did that help you develop then, going straight for full-time football? What was your mentality like then?
Well, I think when I look back, Ian, because my dad was an exceptional father, but he was an installation engineer. He wasn't an expert in the game, so he helped me as much as he possibly could. But when I look back, I went from the Northern League to the North East Counties League to the HFS Loans League, and then we played at Wembley and won the FA Vase, so it was a step up again. But you're still 3 or 4 tiers away from League Two, which was Division 3 at that time. So I jumped to Division 3, and again I wasn't ready, and I was 23, and I was fine dealing with men, but these were men who were really, really fit, and they were talented, and it was tough. The first year I got 4 goals, I think, in about 28 appearances, and I can remember thinking to myself, and again nobody helped me. I remember I was 6 foot. I was probably 11 and a half stone. I remember thinking I always had decent pace, but I wasn't lightning quick. So I remember thinking to myself, I'm not quick enough to be a second striker, and I need to make myself bigger and be a target man who could run. So again, nobody helped you. I went in the gym with a ex-teammate of mine, a lad called Jamie Lawrence, who played for Leicester, played for Bradford in the Premier League. Now, Shabba just got out of prison, and he was lifting really, really heavy weights. And I thought to myself, I need to put some weight on here, because the centre-halves in that league were so strong and so tough. And I thought, I need to beef myself out. So I sacrificed my performance in that first season. I would say for the last 6 months, so say January to June, I just hit the weights heavy. And then I stripped it back and had a massive pre-season. I never stopped. And the results were so emphatic. Mentally, I was obviously ready, because I had a year's experience. And I'd put on 1.5 stone. All of a sudden, I'm playing at 13 stone and can look after myself, but I could run. And I got 15 goals that season. And when I look back, it was a changing moment in my career. All of a sudden, I'd established myself as somebody who had a bit of a reputation in League Two.
So you're saying you didn't really, that was down to yourself. How's that inner mentality then for yourself to do that? Is it something you realised? Because obviously you're saying you'd expect coaches now to tell people, young people, you need to put on weight, you need to be quicker, you need to be stronger. How's that mentality to go, this is what I need? Do you think that's what young people do now, or do you think they have to be told to do that? Because that's a fantastic achievement to say, this is what I need to survive, to have success. Where did that come from?
But you're right about the modern player would be relying on a sports scientist to do that. And I think if you really go deep into something, you're always the best coach. You're your best coach. Ian, you know, I've been busy for 50 years, so all of a sudden I want to take up golf, and I'm at my best when nobody speaks to me, and I can go deep into the technique, and really think about small alterations that make a difference. And it's the same for any professional footballer, for me, or any footballer. You've got to be prepared to go deep. And what taught me was the first 6 months experience. I must have been a lot more aware than I thought. The first 6 months experience at Doncaster, I was failing, and I didn't have a niche because I wasn't quick enough to be a second ball man. Remember, everything was 4-4-2 in them days, and I wasn't strong enough to be a target man. And it was me who went, well, I'm 6 foot, I'm not bad in the air here, I can run. I need to go down the target man route rather than the second ball man route. And that was, when I look back now, it was probably, you know, I'm sure I ran it past my dad and what have you, but I was aware enough to say, right, okay, I'm going to get in the gym with James Lawrence. And it was life-changing when I look back. That decision was life-changing.
I mean, for me, obviously, I mean, you've been there from 93 and I came in 95 and I came pretty similar to yourself from non-league. I jumped from Northern League to League 3 and it was an absolute culture shock for me. But one of the things I always remember is the people there were, as you said, were inspirational to me, just helped me develop. People like yourself, Gary Brabin, John Schofield, and obviously we signed Darren Moore, there was Scott Colcom, Dwayne Darby. These are all very well-respected pros, and I got a lot of good advice to help me. And obviously, I feel very privileged to have played 13 years, 12 years as a professional.
Yeah.
And I bet you didn't do it subconsciously, but do you now think about how you help young people? Or was that a subconscious thing that you did? You didn't mind helping people, or did you just do it naturally? Because I can all go back to that. That was a massive help to me to stay in the game with all the problems. And you talk about failing. I felt like failing when you got in the team, then you were out the team. You just didn't know how you were going to do it. But was that something you subconsciously did, or something you naturally do?
How old were you, Ian?
I was 21 when I came to Donny.
So, because I can remember your first impressions, and you were further down the line as a 21-year-old than I was as a 23-year-old, and I can't remember doing anything particularly outstanding to help you. I was definitely had empathy that you'd come from non-league football and I'd come down the same route. I'd gone down the same route, but you were definitely more ready than I was as a 21-year-old. Definitely. Maybe it was a different position. You played out wide and what have you. Even now, Ian, I try and help people. I think that's my generation. That came from my parents, and I've met loads of people in the game, and remember, I've been at the top level of the game, and they'll say to me, people are only doing that for you because you're you. And I'll say to them, no, people actually do things for nothing, you know, in this world. And I do, no problem. If I feel like I can help somebody, I'd much rather help somebody. So that's just my nature. I don't think you can fabricate that.
I think that's probably a trait and something that you have in you, that you said you didn't do it meaningful, that you didn't know you were doing it. But for someone like me, it was huge. And when I first got there, I know obviously after a year the team got split up. You obviously left to go to Wigan. Obviously Brad left to go to Blackpool, and there was lots of other things. But for that 1 year, the people that were around me really helped me, and it was more like the team spirit that there was created, and the team ethic. I'll go back to it. I remember one game against Lincoln, and we played them at home, and there was a big kickoff near the goal. And we got back in the dressing room in half time, and Brabs had said something like, "It's 1 in, all in." And for me, it was probably 11.5 stone, wringing wet. But that was the team ethic. And that was created through the players. I don't think it was created through the staff. It was created through the players. And you can see from them players, who are named, have all gone on to have successful coaching careers. So do you think that's something that was built in from the inner strength and like very introverted people to go, we need to develop this ourselves? Because obviously I wasn't the leader of that dressing room. I was a follower. I'd just come in. But the likes of yourself, Gary Brabham, Schofield, these were big players who created a team spirit. How did you create that team spirit, do you think?
I think that was our era, Ian. Like our era, the era before us was tougher, was stronger with them values than my era. And then, you're talking about the era down from us. I look up to my time and think, wow, they were strong characters. They stuck together. I just think culturally it's changed so much. And we will sound like old men if we're trying to preach to a modern player that this is the right way. You have to have good ethics and you have to have good values and never forget them. But now, I can think of things that went on in a dressing room that now, if you did that, you'd be up at HR, you'd be getting sued privately, and it's just a different era. I mean, obviously, Brabs went on to be my assistant at Luton. I went on to be Darren's assistant at West Brom. I know Scoff really well. Scott John's working with Darren at Doncaster now. So you're talking about a group of characters who all had leadership skills, or maybe our leadership qualities. Maybe we're just lucky at that time. The owner had a huge part in recruitment. Maybe that was something that he looked for in people. But there was definitely strong characters.
I don't think luck comes into it. I mean, I'm a big believer. Luck comes into it, but I think it's a trait. It's a characteristic that people have, and people don't have to do it. But obviously, then you subsequently went on. You left, obviously, Dante. You went to Wigan, and you went on to have huge success at Wigan. I mean, 31 goals in your first season, and obviously that's when you obviously first met Roberto. And I remember playing against Wigan on I think it was a Tuesday night, and I think you scored a hat trick. You beat us 4-1. You were phenomenal as a team. What was that Wigan team like to go on to have the success that it had, and for you to be a main part of it?
I remember signing for them. I was a club record fee, 150 grand at the time, and Dave Whelan's Wigan just taken over, and there was massive pressure to get promoted. And I put a bit of weight on the summer, Ian, because I'd put a transfer request in at Doncaster. I had a bit of a rough time, wanted to leave, felt frustrated, and I went there and struggled for 6 weeks. And so this is 96 now, and John Dean, the manager, John Benson, named his first 11 and 3 subs at that time, and I didn't make the 14 on the opening day of the season. And one of the players got injured, like a small injury, Charlie Bishop. And on the Tuesday night, he put me on the bench, and I came on against Preston 20 minutes ago and scored, and never looked back really. I managed to, under that kind of pressure, I scored 33 goals, 31 in the league. You're right. And I remember being really excited to go and play with this group of players. Roberto was somebody who I'd saw the previous season, I played against. We had a lot of experienced boys, Wayne Biggins, who played at a good level, Gavin Johnson, Kevin Sharp, and I managed to have a really good strike partnership with a lad called Graeme Lancashire. Just excited to be to go into a club that was doing things properly, and it was the first time really for me that I got educated on the game. I worked with John Dean, somebody I really respected, somebody whose his education was, and it does get filtered down. His education was he played at Ipswich. In the latter part of his career, had a good career, played at Villa. I think he played for England. But the latter part of his career was at Ipswich. Had a good career at Norwich, but he worked under John Lyall, and John Lyall had worked in Sir Alf Ramsey's camp, and they were all purists coming from West Ham, and obviously it gets passed down people's beliefs. All of a sudden, I've got this fight in me that's took me through non-league football to that level, and I'm getting educated on the game, spatial awareness and appreciation of space and creating space and working between the 18-yard box and not going out wide, and working with good players and having a pattern of play. And the benefits were, when the two things collided, were huge for me. And We got promoted that season, beat Fulham on goal difference, won the league, and then following season, I think I got 14 goals in League One, and it was a bit more of a struggle. We were mid-table, but the season after, we playoffs, played Man City over 2 legs, got beat the year they got promoted, and then I left 6 months into the following season, but just a fantastic experience, one that really set me on my path.
I mean, and you're saying you left Wigan and then you went on to a few other clubs and probably didn't have the same success as you probably want. But that was down to, obviously, I've read a lot, it was down to injuries, which obviously people think injuries are horrific for any footballer because it's a lonely place. What was that like psychologically for you, coming from such success to have injury after injury? A psychological thing for you, a mental side of the game, because it's quite lonely, isn't it? How did you deal with that?
Well, again, nobody helps you. Nobody gives you any their advice or sits you down. And I signed with St Johnstone in the Scottish Premier League. They just got knocked out the UEFA Cup, and all of a sudden I'm playing against Martin O'Neill's Celtic, playing against Dick Advocaat's Rangers, and I had a fantastic first season up there. I'd done my cruciate at Wigan, so I was getting over that injury. Did really well, but I'm now 30-year-old, and I get a problem with my knee. It was patella tendonitis. Had an operation, came back. I don't know. 6 weeks later, I had a hole in my cartilage, so I needed a microfracture, which was career-threatening at the time. This is 2000. Came back from that. Tweaked my Achilles tendon. I had to have a boot on for 3 months. Then I got myself really, really fit again. So I'd been out a year at that point. So I got myself so fit that I started my rehab. In the morning, I ran round McDermott Park 1 lap. In the afternoon, I did 2. And then the next day, I did 3. And then the next day, I did 4. Morning and afternoon. I built it up and I got myself so fit that I felt back to my best. Played a reserve game against St Mirren, scored 2 goals, puts me on the bench on the Saturday, Billy Stark. I came on as sub. We're winning 1-0. I got nutted in the back of the head. I got knocked out on the way down, snapped 3 ligaments in my ankle after doing all that work. And I was out in total 15 months, 4 different injuries. And I'd seen a lot in football, but I remember being really emotional, speaking to Billy Kirkwood, one of the assistant managers, saying, I need to get out of this environment. Let me go to Lilleshall for a couple of weeks. And for whatever reason, I've been in management since. The club didn't let me go, but psychologically, I remember thinking I am struggling here without finding a reason for it. Just, I was sick of going to the swimming pool in the afternoon and sick of not playing. And when I look back, I'd probably now be deemed as mental health issues. But again, in that era, there's no explanation for it. You just get on with it. You've got to find a way. And I managed to come back, play a few games. We got relegated that season. And then I left and signed for Southend United that summer. And really, once your biomechanics gets affected, you struggle to train and play consistently. So I really fought from being 28-year-old to 36 when I stopped playing. I fought with injury. I had to alter my training program and training schedule, do a lot more non-weight bearing exercises, like sitting on a bike every morning. And I wouldn't let the bike beat me, because I knew if I let the bike beat me, then I wouldn't be able to play on a Saturday. So it was a lot of self-motivation, a lot of mental strength, a lot of resistance work, mental resistance work in order to get me out there on a Saturday. I had no choice.
I mean, that's huge to go back to its own self-discipline and I mean, for me, that's probably one of the reasons why as you said, you've worked for 50 years and you've had such a fantastic career, not only playing for me, but also coaching. So you're starting to get, I mean, I think I remember going back to somebody telling me that you were probably one of the youngest players to ever get the A license. Is that right?
Yeah, I did it at 29. I roomed with Darren. Darren was in Bradford. Me and Darren Moore roomed together at Lilleshall. So when I look back, Ian, right? Remember, I'm from a working class family, so when I look back, we played Man City over 2 legs. So the season's now the 22nd of May. You've got 4 weeks off. I went to Lilleshall on the 24th of May for 17 days, and I never seen my family. And I did my A licence with Darren and managed to pass first time. It was a huge commitment. Before you can blink, the season's starting again. You don't feel refreshed. But it's something that I wanted to do, and I'd advise anybody, the earlier they can do the coaching badges, the better, because it helps your understanding as a player. It was a great thing. It was a great thing to do. But remember, at that time, I'd been in non-league, so I knew what it was like. You knew what it was like. I was doing me Cert Ed post 16 because I didn't want to be back on a building site when I eventually knew I was going to stop playing. So all these things helped me later down the line.
Do you think, obviously, I mean, I'll be honest, I did my B licence, then I felt my B licence was a bit robotic. And then I did my A licence and I got so much more out of my A licence. I didn't do it as young as yourself. Mine was about 3 or 4 years ago. But do you think them coaching badges then started to make you think differently as the player at the latter side of your career? That you were starting to transition from player to coach and have that philosophy of, this is what I want to do further on? Because obviously we see the coaching badges, but I always talk about it, we pick up our own skills, techniques, but it was just your thought was, I'm 29, I've done my A licence, now I'm going to start thinking about the future and I'm starting adapting the way I play because I understand coaching.
I think it helped, but once I got back in at 23, remember, you're never in control of getting a coaching job. Something you have to be asked to do. Once I got back in at 23, I thought, I'm never going out this game again. That was a promise I made myself. So for me to do an A licence at 29 wasn't a sacrifice. I knew what the future was holding. I started work at Middlesbrough Academy under 14s when I was 32. So I was playing for Boston United in League 2. And I was working at Middlesbrough Academy 3 nights a week and a Sunday. And I did that for 3.5 years, finishing my career playing for Boston, Bury, Clyde and Hamilton Academicals until I was 36. And I'll never forget the help I had from Dave Parnaby and Stan Nixon in having the right examples, the right advice. Dave Parnaby, Stan was a very wise man, but Dave Parnaby showed me what a coach should look like and showed me what our coach should act and showed me what a professional coach was. Somebody who knew, had a real wide range of knowledge, who was immaculately clean, somebody who was articulate, somebody who had time for everybody. So that was a shining light for me. When I look back, it was a great example for me to take that forward.
I mean, then you got your first full-time job at Hamilton. So it was going back up to Scotland to work as your first coach. What was that like then, to doing the transition from playing to being a full-time coach? How did you find that?
Well, Ian, I didn't quite. So when I was 34, I was stuck on 99 career goals. I finished on 99 career goals. So I said to Debbie, my wife, who you know, I said, that's it, I'm done. So I took a full-time job at Darlington College of Technology as the head coach in the football department, where the 16, 17, 18-year-olds were, is it higher ed? Higher education?
It's further
education. So they were in the lessons in the morning and training in the afternoon. Well, I was responsible for the training. So I was at Darlington College for 2.5 years, as well as working in Middlesbrough. But I got a call from Graham Barrow, who asked me to keep playing for him in the league with Bury, part-time. So I took it because, selfishly, I wanted to get 100 goals. I got my 100th goal on my debut. And I could have packed in at that point, but I committed. So I ended up keep playing. Bury for 6 months, Clyde for 6 months, and Hamilton for a year. But I was in a full-time teaching / coaching role, which that had been my plan all along. That Worst case, that's what I'm going to get. And I finally finished playing in May 2006. So the March I'd played my last game, but May my contract finished. And I'd sort of, your body's battered. You look forward to that point. And with my PFA pension, I'd bought myself a city-down lawnmower, and I was living in Norton, just behind the private school in Norton. And the first game of the season was the first game I hadn't been involved in for, 25 years. And I was sitting on the city-down lawnmower, I'd played golf in the morning, all these things I wanted to do. And at 3 o'clock, I was halfway through cutting my grass, and I just stopped my lawnmower. And I was a 36-year-old man. I went, "What are you doing? This is for old people. You need to get back in the game." So I remember phoning Billy Reid, who was my last manager at Hamilton, and I said, "Look, Billy, if you ever need an assistant," because there wasn't loads of money in the championship in Scotland, "if you ever need an assistant," because we got on really well, he's now Graham Potter's assistant at Brighton. "If you ever need an assistant, give me a shout. Just think about me." "Okay, Graham, no problem." So 2 months later, I got a phone call. The board of directors have changed. We've got a few quid. Would like you to come in full time. So I did. I moved up in maybe September 2006, and that was it.
But once again, you initiated that through your own thought process, which obviously for me that's fantastic. You have gone, "I want to do this." So you've gone up to Hamilton and obviously become assistant manager. How was your coaching? Because everyone I speak to talk about your sessions are fantastic. Are you quite innovative in your sessions, or is it something you really think about? Because obviously the way I think now is the way coaching's evolved has been huge, and it's something I think you've got to stay continually developing. So you've gone up to Scotland and then really thought about your coaching. Is that something that, as I say, were you innovative in your coaching?
Not at that time. At that time, I was learning. I think when I went to Hamilton, I think, Ian, there's the coach that you've just described, but then there's the retired footballer who becomes a coach. Now, I'd played with them boys in the dressing room, and I was the experienced one. I knew what it was about. I played with Alec Neil and people like that. Alec was the captain. And when I went back in, I had the respect of the players. And I could put a session on. That doesn't mean to say you're coaching. I could put a session on. But I knew the ins and outs of the game. I knew the intricacies of the game. And that's where I was at that period in my career for 6 months. And I affected them on a human level. I affected them on a management level. And we got great rewards from that. But I was still learning. Meeting, you have to be lucky or you have to be good to meet the right people. So I met Dave Parnaby, and so in the February 2007, Roberto phoned me up and asked me to go to Swansea with him as assistant manager. So I was really happy at Hamilton, but I decided to go because it was a step up, and I loved Rob. I trusted Rob. Rob was a 33-year-old player. So can you imagine, at a young family, putting your whole life in the hands of a 33-year-old player who was going to be the manager of Swansea City? So it's not easy because you trust him. But I knew Rob was different because I'd played with him. So me and him went in February 2007 and made a pact. For the next 10 weeks of this season, we are never going to repeat an exercise, never mind a session. Right? And what that did was it just triggered this creative brain in both of us that we couldn't get satisfaction from repeating sessions. And to this day, I very rarely repeat sessions. So again, meeting the right people or having the right environment, the right background, the right experiences. Obviously, his culture was different to mine, and we helped each other. And that set off an attitude of being creative. And it's easy now for me to see a problem on a football pitch and incorporate that problem in a training session, but try and make it competitive and try and make it enjoyable and try and make that experience where people can learn. But that's 15 years of work now, and 15 years of trialing and erroring, but and making errors. But it was an attitude. It was a culture.
I mean, one of the things you talked about there was the trust, and I think that's a huge word in football. And for you to have that trust in somebody who said 33-year-old, how has that worked together with him for that? Obviously, for the amount of time you work together, as in the trust, he trusts you, you trust him. What sort of relationship is that moving a football club forward? Because obviously, there's got to be times when you differ opinions and things like that. How do you deal with them sort of conflicts?
Well, luckily, we knew each other on a personal level. So, warts and all, we knew each other. I used to stay with them 2 nights a week because I was travelling, and we became firm friends. We had the same idea on the game because of the education I was getting at Wigan. He came from Zaragoza, where it was a real tactical and technical school. In this country, it was physical at that time. Everything was physical and everything was character. And so I think on a human level, we connected. We could say what we wanted to each other. We didn't have to worry about each other's feelings because we'd lived together practically for 18 months. And when we went in at Swansea, there was an opportunity because the club weren't skint. They just moved to a new stadium. Roberto had played with the players 6 months earlier. I played the role of the bad cop, so I was creative, but I could really dig people out at that time, and that division was straightforward. And it needed shaking up. Roberto was highly intelligent, again, very creative, very tactical, and we were right at the beginning of the queue to change football philosophy. So we were, after 6 months in there, we went 4-3-3. We played possession football. We were playing out from the back. We signed a goalkeeper that was like Edison at that level, and the power of that philosophy was embedded in the lower leagues, which managed to serve Swansea in such good stead for 10 years. Because and when you change any philosophy, you have to get success with it in order for people to believe into it and buy into it. And that was the process. That's what happened to us in our time at Swansea.
I mean, then obviously you went on from Swansea after success. You went on to Wigan, and obviously I want to touch on the Wigan because obviously Wigan were a Premier League club, and I've talked to players and people before about the Premiership being ruthless. I talked to Andy Taylor last week about he played in the Premier League and how it's unforgiving.
Yep.
He said he played in the Championship and it was he could get through games. He said going to the Premiership was unforgiving. The word ruthless, players just never stopped running. You thought players did 40 runs in the Championship, they were doing 60 at the optimum pace. Yeah. How do you then transfer them skills to the pressure of the Premier League, the biggest league in the world? And obviously from me, it's obviously in your brain of understanding how do you do that from week to week?
With great difficulty, because we came from a winning culture, and at Wigan Athletic, you're not going to win many games. In the Premier League, we probably won 10 games that season and drew 10, and that was success. It kept us up. I think we got 38 points. But the shock, we went. Graham Potter's one of my best friends. Played with him at Boston, and Graham's now. I haven't spoken to him, but I can see he's facing the same thing at Brighton. He's been used to winning football matches. Brighton are on 36 points. I think he went, including lockdown, he went from December to the Arsenal game without winning a game. Now, that's very, very difficult to deal with. Swansea winning 3 games a week. And then you go to Wigan. I can remember going 9 games, no wins. But that doesn't mean to say you're unsuccessful. It doesn't mean to say that you're going to get sacked. I mean, luckily, we had an incredible owner who knew us previously and was always prepared to give us time, Dave Whelan. And it was getting your head around. That was the biggest problem. Never mind the culture. The culture of Premier League players is very different to the culture of lower league players. So there were so many issues we had to deal with. And our job was to finish 4th bottom. And it was to stay in the Premier League at all costs. So we went from winning League One with Swansea, finishing one place outside the playoffs with Swansea in the Championship, to keeping Wigan in the Premier League for 3 seasons, which was so different, such a different set of skills to work under them levels of pressure and that level of negativity regularly, and still show the character and the positivity to make sure that when the 38th game came around and finished, that we were still in the Premier League, because that's what the job entailed.
I mean, you must have created a really, really strong mentality for them players to buy into. We're going to finish like 17th in the Premier League. How do you do that on a personal level and a coaching level, that these players you're buying into you to do that? So you're buying into finishing 17th. How's that mentally for them and for yourself?
Well, remember, you're leading them, so it has to come from you first. So all the fight I had in my career to get there. So I'm now 39, so I've been fighting since I was 16 when I went to Millwall to get the Premier League. I wasn't going to let it go easy, even though some days drained you. Standards. To this day, I'll never shortchange a session, any session at any level. Them 2 things stand you in such good stead. And then on top of it, if you've got the tactical nous and you can get the best out of your players, and I reckon we had 9 players who were good enough for the Premier League in the first 6 months. And I remember we had to err on the side of caution because we couldn't afford an injury, playing once a week. And then Christmas came, we managed to sign 5 players who were going to help the group. All of a sudden, we had 12 players who could play in the Premier League. That's management. That's surviving. That's giving yourself a chance to work the next season and build again. And all them things were, you call on every quality you've got.
I mean, obviously then Wigan went on to win the FA Cup. What was that like? Obviously, that must have been huge.
But Ian, like the second season, we did Survival Sunday, right? So, you're playing for 85 million or whatever it is. Everybody's livelihoods is on mine and Rob's shoulders, particularly him. But I've got huge responsibility. So you're growing and you're developing all the time. So we play. This is the Premier League. This is what people don't talk about, the mental aspect. So we've got 2 games to go. We're playing West Ham on a Sunday, 4:00 on the telly. Premier League all plays on the Saturday. We're second bottom, they're bottom going into the game. Whoever loses getting relegated. We're 2-0 down at half time. Demba Ba scored 2 goals. I'm in charge of set pieces against. I've paired him up with Momo Diame to mark him. He's lost Momo twice and we're 2-0 down. So we're down. Roberto makes a few tactical decisions, brings Victor Moses on, Connor Salmon on, a lad was signed from Scottish Premier League. We score quite early on. Charles Nzogbia scores a free kick, and then he scores the last kick of the game to win 3-2. And you're walking around the pitch, last home game, euphoria. And Roberto says to me, Graeme, we've still got to go to Stoke and win, right? Now, Stoke, it's Tony Pullis's Stoke. I'm in charge of defensive set plays. You've got Rory Delap shelling them in from his own halfway line. Corners against, wide free kicks for, blah, blah, blah. Now, to handle Survival Sunday, and I can tell you, I can't remember being as nervous in my life for a football match. But I wanted the experience. And we were thorough in our preparation for it, so we covered everything. Now, 4 clubs got relegated that day. I think maybe 5, Birmingham, Blackpool, us, Blackburn. And we managed, Hugo Rodallega scored after 60 minutes. We managed to win 1-0 and stayed in the league. But I remember on the Thursday putting a long throw on, so we brought the pitch in at Wigan. We've got one of our goalkeepers, Mike Pollitt, taking a goalkeeper's throw to try and replicate Rory Delap. We've done this 6 times from the right, 6 times from the left, covered it, organisation, I remember Shawcross come up, Huth came up, Kenwyn Jones was in the box. And right at the end of the session, Iñaki Bagora, who's our goalkeeping coach from Basque Country, says, I get called Bonner. But if Ali Al-Habsi comes for the ball, make sure the fullback's on the line. 20 minutes gone in the game, Ali comes for the ball, misses it. Robert, I think it was Kenwyn Jones, heads it. It's going in the back of the net. Boise on the line, clears the ball off the line. We win the game 1-0. So it tells you the level of detail that's required. We'll stay in the Premier League and you've got another opportunity.
Yeah.
But you're growing in experience all the time, every single day. So then eventually the following season we'll stay up with 2 games to go. Now we're talking finest details. 2 games, not 1, 2. First season was 2, second season was 1. So the 4th season we're now Wigan. It's our club. Me and Robert played there. We're light with signings that summer. Felt strong enough that we could stay in the Premier League and win and try and have a go at winning the FA Cup. So early rounds we played kids. Now again, small details. We signed a player called Mauro Baselli from Estudiantes in Argentina in our second season in the Premier League, and it didn't work out. He went back out on loan to South America. He comes back in the second season. Struggled for goals. 1 goal I think he got. We played Bournemouth in the 3rd round of the FA Cup. Jordi Gomez scored a penalty with 10 minutes to go to make it 1-1. We had to go down there for the replay. The year we won it, down there for the replay. I'd been working on a 12-week programme with Mauro Baselli to improve his speed and his strength, get him used to the English game. He scored a goal that the goalkeeper got a hand on. It just rolled over the line. We beat Bournemouth 1-0 in a 3rd round replay. And if we're talking about fractions in sport, we then beat Macclesfield. I think the next game was Macclesfield. We went to Huddersfield. I'm missing around. Went to Huddersfield in the last 16. Went to Everton in the quarters. We'd never won at Everton, but we played there 3 or 4 times. So you get used to the environment. Beat them 3-0. Tactically, we really hurt them tactically. 4 teams left in: Man City, Chelsea, Millwall, and us. We get Millwall in the semis at Wembley. Bit of luck. Beat Millwall 2-0. All of a sudden, you're in an FA Cup final. Now, I've got to tell you the story. Have I got time to tell you the story of this week?
Yeah.
We play West Brom. This is the 2nd season, and only the 2nd season ever, that an FA Cup final has been decided before the last game of the season. On the Saturday, we play West Brom, who were under Steve Clarke. We beat them 3-2 to win in the Premier League. On the Tuesday night, we're playing Swansea at home. Now, Swansea's our former club, and they didn't like how we left. We're 1-0 up, 1-1, 2-1 up, 2-2. Last kick of the game on the Tuesday night, we got beat 3-2. One of our players, Angel Rangel, who we signed for €10,000 from 2nd Division in Spain, scored the winner. Practically had with throats cut. We're relegated. Now we've got an FA Cup final on the Saturday. 2 days recovery in, as you know. Wednesday, Thursday. And I remember small detail we're talking about. I remember going into the coaching room before the train session on the Friday, and we had myself, Roberto, Graham Barrow, Dennis Lawrence, Richard Evans in the room. Roberto says, we have to work. I need 10 balls today. We have to work on something tactically. And we're playing Man City the next day in the FA Cup final. That's Yaya Toure, David Silva, Tevez, Aguero, Nasri, Zabaleta, Cliche, Joe Hart, Company. I'm missing somebody, but top team. Gareth Barry, who will later work with at Everton. So I need 10 balls. Rob, I says, we need all our energy. We've got Bonner, we need 10 balls. Okay, so we played Man City in the April, because when you do well in the FA Cup, your league games get put back.
Yeah.
We played a unique system against them, and it worked really well. But we didn't really penetrate and hurt them in the final third. So he wanted to work on that aspect. Okay, 10 balls, do it. Next day comes, them 10 balls, Ian. Them 10 balls won us the FA Cup. Tactically, we hurt them. Instead of just being looking good, we played in the last third of the pitch, so we really penetrated and took the game away from them. Zabaleta got sent off because of it. I mean, players need to play well. Aruna, Kone, and Callum McManaman were magnificent that day. And long story short, smallest of detail, came together, set piece, 89th minute, Ben scores. Next thing, Wigan Athletic have won an FA Cup. So we win, magnificent feeling. You know, we've all been young lads watching it. On the bus on the way home, pizzas only. We're in the next day. We're playing Arsenal on the Tuesday at the Emirates. We've got to win to take it to the last day of the season. On the Sunday, all the Premier League teams are playing. We'll get with throat cut. Newcastle win, Norwich win, everybody. So we had to go and beat Arsenal. 1-1, 60 minutes. We ended up getting beat 4-1 and got relegated that night with one game to go. And it was like a football death, because it was our club. We absolutely loved Wigan, just achieved something so incredible and got relegated. And the mixture of emotions that week, you just cannot explain. Yeah, it was a culmination in going to try and win a trophy and trying to stay in the Premier League. Devastated. I look back now with great pride. 36 points we got that season, which would have been enough to stay up in a lot, and won an FA Cup at Wigan Athletic. And we made history. And I've got to tell you, in football, history is the hardest thing to do. It's a lot easier to follow people, but to create history, you have to get people to believe. And that was an incredible experience.
One of the things you've touched upon, obviously, since I went away from football and I did a degree, and one of the things you keep resonating in is the marginal gains, the small detail. Is that something you believe in your coaching career really, really helps? Like the marginal gains, the 1%, the 0.5% that helps. Is that something that you really trust yourself and believe in?
It's hard work, so you have to do it. You have to put the time in, and it'll show. If you've got good enough players, it'll show. And I know that for a fact, but people are not prepared to burn their brain. People are not prepared to live for the job. Right early on, me and Roberto were very serious about it, and I just thought, I'm going to commit to this 24/7, and I don't care. What's the big deal? I'd rather commit to something I love. I didn't want to just go in at 8 and finish at 5 and leave it at my door. It was my whole life. I went to bed trying to go to sleep, thinking about training sessions, and that's how it was. That's what it took.
I mean, as a coach, obviously you never switch off. I mean, I work in non-league now, and I still never switch off. I mean, I've got a full-time job and work in non-league, going back to the north. We work in like the Northern Premier League. But then you went on to work at the World Cup with top players. How do you manage like the top players? Because I assume they're ultimate professionals and things like that. But did you believe in yourself to manage the Hazards, the Vincent Kompany's, the Lukaku's? Because obviously, I mean, that must be a huge pleasure. But obviously, they're listening to you. How's that?
Well, remember, Ian, you forgot Everton. Now we had 3 years at Everton, and first season we finished 5th, record points total, 72 points. Second season, we're the last team left in Europe. Third season, we got to 2 domestic semi-finals, finished 11th, got sacked. So again, learning curve to get you to that level. I'm working with Ross Barkley, Leighton Baines, Phil Jagielka, John Stones, Romelu Lukaku, James McCarthy, Gareth Barry, Seamus Coleman, Tim Howard, Sylvain Distin, every day. So again, it's progression. You don't just go from Wigan to Belgium. And it was a fantastic experience, great football club. But then we got sacked. It wasn't deemed good enough. In my opinion, again, made the mistake of trying to win something because that's what was needed rather than just finishing in the top 10, which was the requirement. But obviously, our work had been recognised. We moved on to Belgium national team and just don't know. I'd had enough experience. Nothing fazed me. They were human beings. I wasn't bothered about what level they'd played at. And I mean, at the time, what you have to understand is they were working for Guardiola, Mourinho, Conte, Klopp, all the top managers in the world. Saki, is it Sagi at Napoli, who's the Juventus manager now, who's the Chelsea manager? You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Arrigo Sacchi. I forget he's sorry ball.
Oh, yeah.
So, can you imagine the level they were working at? They were expecting the same from you, and if you didn't work at that level or above, they would let you know.
Really?
So, no messing about. Have you seen The Last Dance? Have you seen Michael Jordan?
Yeah.
These are people with that kind of
mentality.
These are winners. They expect elite level coaching. They expect elite level behavior. They expect you to have elite empathy with them. You can pitch that wrong. So again, it was just another huge challenge, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a great job. I was traveling Europe watching the best games in the world because that's where the players were. But I was based in Belgium and I was away from my family. I was living in Waterloo in Belgium because me and Roberto lived over there. So for 2 years, but I sacrificed that because I wanted to go to a World Cup. And went to a World Cup, which was just something that you never dream of doing, and I think I had a major part to play.
Yeah, massively. I mean, obviously you played against England, didn't you? What was that like, obviously, as an English coach? Because obviously, from my point of view, the respect to manage at that level, but then to manage against your own country. Obviously, Roberto, he didn't really have that. He worked in England, but you're the English coach. And there was I remember there was quite a lot of media press on yourself of an English coach working for Belgium, playing against England. How did you find the pressures of that?
That was the only one I really struggled with. I'd gone to Newcastle, team I supported as a boy, were Wigan and Everton, and you sort of overcome that because you have to be professional. And I'm standing there, and my national anthem's being played, and I can't sing along to it because I'm working for a different federation. But I'm in charge of defensive set plays and patterns of attacking play, and England have scored against everybody with set plays. So I've got my job to do. And we played them in the group stages and they didn't score. And we played them in the third and fourth place playoff and they didn't score. So you have to go about your work. And I made it professional, even though it was when that national anthem was playing, it was really difficult. I mean, I know Gareth well. Me and Gareth were on the pro license together, and I've got huge respect for Gareth. So it was just awkward all round. But I don't know, something you had to.
But like you say,
I suppose the group game was the weird one because everybody knew it was the loser was actually going to be in a better position. But you can't promote being a winning team and then ask a team to lose. So
the professionalism itself must have been huge. I mean, obviously, I like to touch on, have you got a specific coaching philosophy or something that you really trust and believe in? Because you talked about standards. So is that something you link into your coaching philosophy? Because I'm just obviously thinking about from a teaching point of view, from an educational point of view. I'm speaking to somebody who's worked at a World Cup, won the FA Cup, loads of games in the Premier League. Is there a coaching philosophy that you specifically have, or is it adaptable?
It's changed. It was absolute possession. 9/10 of the law for 10 years. But then you see the game changing, and if you don't know how to press well, then it won't be enough. If you don't know how to counter-attack well, then it won't be enough. So it's definitely changed, but your players dictate your philosophy. If I'm at Belgium now, or if I'm at Barcelona, Real Madrid, I would ensure that we had tried to dominate possession. Because if you dominate possession, your margin for error is a lot less. The opposition don't have the ball as much. You have to have good players. You see Man City, Liverpool last night. Man City are playing out from the back in ridiculous areas, but they've got the players to do it. And I know don't underestimate the game. City wanted to win. That's how important the mental aspect is, and Liverpool found it hard to get up to it. But if we're talking about styles of play, that controlling the ball and possession football for me is still the most important quality, with the ability to press, with the ability to understand transition and be ruthless on the counter-attack, with the ability to defend your own box. So all them things, with your ability to defend as a team now, because you have to defend with 10 players in your third, or certainly 9.5. So there's so many aspects here, and that's without talking about set pieces, that encompass a philosophy.
I mean, that's a great ideology, because as you've said, it changes with the level you're coaching at and the players you're coaching at. If you are, obviously, you've been a manager, you've been a coach, how do you continually develop? Because you're at that level where I think you've got every coaching qualification. How do you develop?
Remember, as an assistant manager, I moved up every single season. It was a different challenge, a better challenge. It was, I went from Swansea to Wigan to Everton to Belgium. And then I sort of consolidated that at West Brom, working with Darren, because I was working with somebody else as an assistant. My responsibilities were huge. And the next step for me was being a manager. So I've developed constantly throughout my career. I've never stood still. And I know I'll continue to develop now, as nothing prepares you for being a manager, nothing. And I was a hands-on assistant and very experienced at every level, but nothing prepares you for everything lands at your door. And it was the best thing I ever did. So I'm really pleased I did it. So that's how I develop an answer to your question.
So obviously what you're saying is you continue learning, and that's obviously something you want to do and you need to do. So you've obviously evolved into a manager. How do you then transfer them skills to that really, like the important one-to-one conversations? You're not playing, you're going to get released, you're not good enough, or deemed not good enough, because obviously it's an opinionated sport. How do you deal with that, going from the assistant to the main man?
Again, with experience. I think initially it was I was very coach-led, and then I understood the importance of when to coach and when to manage. And the longer you get in any job, the better you'll become if you're committed to it. And that's what I took from it. I think my last 6 games at Luton, we drew 2, won 3, lost 1, kept 3 clean sheets. And obviously the pandemic came along and it changed a lot of things. But when I look back at it now, I just see learning again all the way. And you have to be prepared to make mistakes. You have to be prepared to get things wrong. But along the way, you're gonna learn, and there's no better way than learning at the core phase.
I mean, the last question from me, because your time's been absolutely superb and really appreciated, is what sort of advice would you give young coaches or any coach coming to Graeme Jones and saying, what's the best bit of advice would you give people?
Stan Nixon said something to me when I left Middlesbrough and I went to Hamilton. He said, and I was going to move to Swansea, and he says to me, Graeme, if you don't commit to something, you'll never be successful. And I thought, and I stood by that. And what that means is, if I'm working in Swansea, I need to live in Swansea. And if I'm doing that job, I need to live for that job 100%. And that's what I've done. I've committed everything I've done wholeheartedly. And some have worked and some haven't. But the majority, well, I think every one of them, I've got respect and hold my head up high. I've always maintained standards, but I've learned along the way. And I just think you've got to be prepared to roll your sleeves up and get out there and make mistakes. If you make mistakes, then you're going to learn and you're going to improve. If you've got a good level of intelligence and you're down to earth and you can self-analyze and self-reflect, and that would be the advice. Get out and do it as soon as you can.
I mean, great. It's been absolutely fantastic to talk to you. Obviously, 20 years, I think. You were one of my, I talk about role models, you were one of my role models growing up, the likes of yourself, Gary Brabham. These are the people when I talk to my students who educated me. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your stories because they've been absolutely outstanding. And really thank you for your time, Graeme.
Well, Ian, I'm here because of my relationship with you, because you're always a great lad and I enjoyed working with you. With the greatest respect, I wouldn't have done it for many people. So it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it as well. Anytime, man.
Thank you, mate. Go and enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, pal.
Bye.